Want to talk about fruit thinning. I know I've done this before, but I know a lot of you have come to this new, and I'm sort of blogging about what we're doing through the orchard year, not worrying too much if I've said something in the past. Now, this is Laxton's Epicure, and this is set more heavily than any other tree in the orchard. I've got about 2 foot of branch here, and it has got about 55 apples on it. I couldn't quite count them all.
Welcome, my friends of the interwebs. Sorry about that little jittering on the screen. You were looking at Stephen Hayes, the impeccable Stephen Hayes, also known as Colonel Stephen Hayes, because he is a Kentucky colonel, one of the many in England, actually. A lot of people don't realize this, but Winston Churchill was a Kentucky colonel, and as is Stephen Hayes. Some people know him as Dr. Stephen Hayes, because he is an MD. And I want to use Stephen as an illustration. Let me see if I can't get a picture of him on here. Let me go ahead and mute that. Stephen is really the perfect illustration for what I'm talking about when I talk about you don't really know people on YouTube. You really don't. And let me give you an example. Stephen Hayes is a guy who I first met, well, now more than a few years ago. I can't really remember when I first met him. But I wanted to plant an orchard, an apple orchard on my land in Kentucky. When I was a kid growing up in that holler, there were apple trees. My grandmother and I would go and pick apples. She would make fried apples and apple pies and apple sauces and apple butter and all kinds of good stuff. But I realized that most of those trees had died out or just weren't producing anymore, and I wanted to rectify that. But I was smart enough to know I didn't know what the hell I was doing, so I went to YouTube and I typed in things like how to prune apples and whatnot, and ran across this very humble apple grower, this farmer, you know, and he really was extremely knowledgeable, and he was sharing his knowledge with everybody, and it was like, oh, wow, you know, this is perfect. And I learned a lot. And then one day, after knowing him, by the way, for probably a year, okay, one day I decided I was going to make a video dealing with socialized healthcare, because that debate was going on. And now that was before Obamacare. But that debate was going on. And I made a video and I talked about it. Well, all of a sudden, one day I noticed there was a video reply. Okay, awesome. Somebody's chiming in on it. I love that. And it was Stephen Hayes, and I thought to myself, well, okay, you know, and I clicked his video, and normally every video I ever seen of his, he was in his apple orchard. Most of them, 99% of them, he was in his apple orchard. But this time it was a little different. He didn't have his humble, you know, farmer's attire on. He had a white lab jacket. Underneath that, he had a button-down shirt with a tie. And around his neck, he had a stethoscope. You know, you could have knocked me over with a feather. And he introduced himself as Dr. Stephen Hayes. And I was just like, holy cow. And he's an MD. And I would never, ever, if you would have told me, well, if you would have asked me about Stephen Hayes through that whole year, I'd been like, yeah, I know him really well. You know, we've talked back and forth together. He's a great guy. He's an apple orchard guy. He grows apples for a living. That's what he does. That's what I thought. And I would have been convinced, and if somebody would have said, well, you know, he's a doctor, I'd been like, oh, what are you smoking? He's not a doctor. Come on. I know Stephen as well as anybody does. And that's kind of my point, is that what we know about one another on YouTube is what we're willing to share with one another. And that's it. You may think you know somebody, but you don't really know them. Well, maybe you do, but there's always that chance that you really don't. You know, and I think that it's easy for a lot of us to get caught up in the game of mischaracterizing one another. And I'm guilty of it. I don't know how many people, I'm quick to call people a douchebag. Well, I shouldn't say it, because Stephen Hayes hates the term douchebag. he says it's gender specific, and it's not something he endorses. So sorry about that, Stephen. We'll just say dirtbag. So D-bag, short for dirtbag. I'm quick to call people D-bags. I am, you know, and yeah, I'm human. That's what we do. And it's unfortunate because, and I'm using Stephen Hayes as an illustration, that, you know, what you see that person, and maybe you, in your mind, they're being a D-bag, or maybe in your mind their views are D-baggish or whatever, but you don't really know them. You know, seriously, you don't really know them, you know. And Stephen Hayes is an interesting guy. And as I got to know more and more about him, you know, I found out that he was a very pious man. I found out that he loved to support various charities. In fact, he wrote a cookbook, or as he refers to it, I guess Europeans refer to it as a cookery book. And that the proceeds from that book went to a charity. And then one thing led to another, and then Stephen and I got involved with a charity where we were raising money for the International Red Cross, raising money for the flood victims of Pakistan. And we took a lot of grief for that. In fact, it left a pretty bad taste in my mouth, if you want to know the truth. I was attacked by a lot of people. In fact, people that I had some respect for, and they attacked me because I was raising money for, as they referred to them, filthy ragheads. So, you know, that's one of the reasons, by the way, that I try not to get too involved with charities online anymore. I'm very active in my real life. I've supported a lot of various charities of my choice, especially the Honorable Order of Kentucky Colonels. They do a lot of good work in Kentucky, raising money for for wheelchairs and all kinds of stuff. But I mean, for the most part, I try to steer clear from online charity stuff. I just do, and that's one of the reasons because of the work that Stephen Hayes and I had done. And so, yeah, I mean, you know, Stephen's a very multifaceted person. And if you only watched 25, 50 videos of his, especially early on, you'd have never known that. You know, you just would have never known that because for whatever reason, he wasn't sharing that part of his life with us. Now, I don't think he was doing that purposely, not wanting people to know he's a doctor, but they just weren't what he was doing. He was making videos on apple orchards, so I don't think he felt the need to explain to everybody every little part of his life. You know, of course, that didn't keep people like me from making a lot of really stupid assumptions. I just assumed that he was a simple farmer, a simple apple grower. You know, yeah, you know, and how wrong was I? He's a lot more than that. And of course, now he is a Kentucky Colonel, which, by the way, a lot of people ask me about that. Yeah, you don't have to be in Kentucky. You don't even have to be a citizen of the United States to be a Kentucky Colonel. In fact, Sir Winston Churchill, Prime Minister of Great Britain, was a Kentucky Colonel. In fact, there's a fair amount of Kentucky Colonels in England. I don't know how many, but more than a few, that's for sure. Now, Stephen may be the first Kentucky Colonel from Old Hampshire, but definitely not the first Kentucky Colonel in the UK by a long shot. So anyway, I'm going to do another video on Kentucky Colonels because there's a lot of douchebaggery going, or dirtbaggery going on, and I need to clear up some things. And every now and again, I got to do that, especially when people spout off because they think they know something that they really don't. But anyway, I don't want to get too off track because, as you know, I'm very easily sidetracked. So anyway, but my point, to illustrate my point, is that we only see what people want us to see. It's just that simple. And unfortunately, a lot of people don't understand that. You know, they really don't. A lot of people make assumptions about me. You know, now I will tell you that I am much more transparent about my life than most people are, but that's my choice. And here's the other thing too. If somebody doesn't want to share a part of their life with you, that's their business. Then they don't share that part of their life with you. I don't personally think that's a big deal. You know, I know that some people think that for some reason we all owe them. You know, I don't know why they feel that way, but they sure do. You know, they think that we owe them a whole. And most of those people, by the way, don't even make videos. You know, that's the funny thing about that. But yeah, I mean, you know, for the most part, you know, now my experience on YouTube has been overwhelmingly positive. Overwhelmingly positive. From time to time, it's not so positive, but, you know, you're going to have that, you know. However, having said all of that, be just overly careful when you start characterizing people on YouTube. By the way, whether you characterize them as a good person, a bad person, this or that, you know, just understand that they're sharing a sliver of their life with you. Maybe it's just a hobby. You know, just because, for example, just because somebody's a prepper doesn't mean they're a decent person, doesn't mean they're a patriot. Okay? I think a lot of people assume a lot of things. They see somebody prepping and they think, oh, this is a good guy, he's a patriot. He could be a freaking nut job. You know? I mean, and I've met more than a few of those on YouTube. You know, you just don't know. You know, you see somebody doing something good for somebody else, you know they got some good in them. but maybe that's the only good thing they've ever done in their entire life. You know, but hopefully they're heading on on the path to the right direction. You know, I don't know. Anyway, listen, that's all I got for you. I just wanted to use Stephen Hayes as an illustration for, you know, we really don't know everything there's to know about one another, and so be careful about characterizing people. Be careful about calling people D-bags. And listen, I will be honest with you. I'll be completely honest with you. I've called some people D-bags in retrospect really weren't. But I'm a D-bag. That's what I do. I'm a D-bag. And for those people who think that I take myself way too seriously and have this ginormous ego or whatever, nobody takes themselves less serious than I do. Really. I know it's hard to believe, but it's true. Anyway, Stephen, those of you who don't know, Stephen has Taurus Achilles Henon. I wish him Godspeed and recovery. There'll be a link below to Stephen's channel. Please subscribe to him. It's worth it. It's just worth it. Anyway, that's all I got. Everybody take care. See ya!